Welcome into the Bet the W show. I'm Danielle Alvari, your host, and very sad to report we only have one WNBA game on Thursday to look at. The Connecticut Sun are visiting the Minnesota Lynx, but positive note, we have the best guest here to talk about it. It's Brendan Glasheen. He does play-by-play for the Connecticut Sun, so you've probably heard his voice before on those broadcasts, and he also works in the betting space. So we'll look at the game. The NBA Finals are obviously starting game one on Thursday night, so there are actually 4 W games on Friday this week. So we will look ahead to those games. We don't have lines yet, but we'll guess the lines and we'll give our initial impressions. And since we are a fledgling new baby podcast, if you like the Bet the W show, make sure you follow it, rate it, share it, twist it, bop it. You get the idea. And to keep up with it all, you can follow us along on Twitter at Bet the W show. Brendan Glasheen, friend of the show, friend of me, I hope so. How the heck are you? How's the start of the season been?
No, we're friends. We're good.
Okay.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me on. Love that you are doing this new show and having guests, very reputable guests around the W, and we're off and running. It's a sprint. It really is. Mm-hmm. So it's great to have the season back though and have plenty of games.
Yeah, and I want to talk to you about your Connecticut Sun, of course, and we have a game on Thursday. But before we look ahead, let's look back to Tuesday. The Lynx lost again. Yep. They have not won a game yet, 0-5 to start the season, but they did cover by the hook, plus 5.5, 94-89, which, by the way, is now 2 times in a row that the Wings have failed to cover by the hook, and I know it personally from that first one. The books are dialed in on them, it looks like, and this also went way over. So The Lynx offense has actually started to look smooth, but they did lose that huge lead that they opened the game with, I believe, up 22-8 to start, and then just completely got outscored by Dallas. What did you think?
Yeah, built a big 14-point lead, down 6 at half. They've had some moving parts. I think Tiffany Mitchell in the starting lineup. Cheryl Reeves, a big fan of Tiff Mitchell. I think that's a lineup we're going to see with Mitchell running the point. Had 17 points in that game coming over from Indiana in the offseason, running the point. They've got a lot of moving parts, even though they returned most of their roster, still trying to get Collier back into a groove, which she looks great early on, no question about it, but just trying to navigate different lineups. They did this last year too. They had Banham coming in and out of the lineup, changing her role. Rachel Banham, former Connecticut Sun. So Cheryl Reeve knew when Sylvia Fowles retired, this was going to be a reset kind of year. And for Dallas, the win now moves they made in the offseason, they really don't have any reason being down as many as they were. So Dallas has that kind of firepower with their additions, and DeShields, Howard, they're fitting in, and Arike has done a good job of. She had a great second half too. Arike was dominant in that second half. So Minnesota's still.
I had
trying
over
to figure
her points prop, and she didn't get that done for me. But
what was the number?
Still got into the 20s. I think it was 23.5, and she had 21. But she's opened to the season with 27, 26, 27, and now 21. So I think she'll get back on track in this next one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Liberty
at the Storm,
Jessica
too.
Shepard's been a nice has had a nice start, balanced score sheet for Minnesota. Ariel Powers is a vet. They've got some vets, they've got some pieces, but clearly still trying to figure out what works best. I know Kayla McBride had to go to a wedding, so she missed some time. So they're still trying to get it all sorted out.
Yeah, I think that the Lynx will improve this season, and I'm encouraged that they were able to score 89, albeit against a Dallas Wings defense. Still promising. Liberty at Storm. The Storm covered the 15. The Storm covered plus 15. Jewel Lloyd scored 26, which just happened to be a point more than Brianna Stewart, who was in her first visit back to Seattle. Sabrina looked good. She had 20. Courtney Vandersloot had 11 assists. Tell me not to bet a Courtney Vandersloot over on her assists just about every game this season. Tell me not to.
I can't argue. If Sabrina's having her way though, and they're sharing the wealth in terms of the assist totals, I could understand why that could be problematic. They're going to be really good. They look great against Connecticut. Great second half. Sun started turning it over. Ball got stagnant. Stephanie White installing a new offense, but New York has firepower, as we know. But I think what gets overlooked, because it's super team, and it's not just that they're a super team. They're as Stephanie said, they're a matchup nightmare because of their size.
Yeah.
Like they can put Benijah Laney, who just kind of gets lost in my opinion in the whole thing. doing little things that don't show up in the box score. Brianna Stewart was talking about Benaja's impact, and at the end of the day, we're just trying to impact wins, and it doesn't matter what the score sheet says in terms of what the box score says. But you put Benaja Laney at the 2, it's not just their offense. They can score, but if Jonquel Jones is bought in with a lesser role, still coming back from an injury, still trying to find her footing, clearly she's had to make the biggest adjustment of the entire mix of the stars they brought in. But if Laney and JJ are bought in on the defensive end, because that's what I thought stood out for the Sun, of all people that could guard Brianna Stewart the last half decade when Connecticut got Jonquel Jones was the one guarding Brianna Stewart. Now they're on the same team. So JJ brings it defensively, and so does Laney if she's playing the 2.
Right, and Han Shu on the bench. Yep. So just size everywhere for this New York team on top of everything else they have, just wealth on top of wealth. Another team that finally maybe got a little bit back on track, the Dream. They were at home. They beat the Sky 83-65. I think this is more symptomatic of the Sky missing a couple pieces, but an easy cover for the Dream. What have you thought about the Dream so far? Because for me, they've always been the most inconsistent team to bet on, dating back to 2 seasons for me now, and that continues into this season.
Ryan Howard going with the goggles, is that a thing we should expect going forward? The reigning rookie. I love it. It looks great. The reigning rookie of the year. No, they're buying into what Tanisha has installed. It wasn't going to be perfect in year 1. And I think we're seeing, there is value in keeping camaraderie. Well, having stability and having continuity, and I think that's what Atlanta is trying to put into place. That was a tough way to go down against Indiana over the weekend. I thought the Fever are going to battle all year. But Atlanta, I think, was that team last year at times that would bother teams. And I think Atlanta figured, well, we're a step above. But they bounce back, as good teams bounce back after a tough loss like that and don't let those snow pile. So if with their size, and I really think their additions on the wing in having Gray coming over from Dallas just adds so much. If they can play on the defensive end, their offense will come more naturally. But they had some problems last year defensively. If they're more consistent on that front, they're going to be an annoying, pesky team that teams do not want to run into.
I agree, and it was the Fever and the Dream last year. The Fever are a team that the Sun just played, and the Sun only won by 3 at home. The under did hit by the grace of the hook, my goodness. But should the fact that they only won by 3 be a cause for concern?
I don't think so, because I think Indiana's hungry. Aaliyah Boston is without question
looks good,
a game changer, WNBA body, already almost, it's reminding me of Brianna Jones. And I think she's on the fast track to be, no disrespect to Breezy, but even better than Brianna Jones sooner and get to that level. But Boston and Alyssa Smith are a tandem that they're only going to get better. It's only going to get better as the year goes on. Opening night when the Sun won, they couldn't buy a bucket in the fourth quarter. Again, installing a new offense. But Indiana's got the jitters out. They're playing together. Kelsey Mitchell, I think here's a fascinating dynamic that I think gets overlooked. Kelsey had to play a lot of hero ball for that team last year. Now, seeing how it looks now, maybe they could have done this last year, but now using Kelsey Mitchell off the ball and having another ball handler in Erica Wheeler, former Atlanta Dream, Kelsey catch and shoot, Kelsey catch and dribble, it's throwing defenses off. I think what we're going to see more of from Indiana is just trying to orchestrate offense going directly into the post, and they're going to hit some threes, I think. They had some. Nalissa Smith had a great look.
They want to.
Nalissa Smith had a look in the game last night where Aaliyah Boston got the rebound, put it back up, and ended make it a 1-point game. And then Lexi Hull, I mean, you can't ask for a better look in the corner to tie the game in the final possession for the Fever offensively. So, no, I think Connecticut is still in a learning phase as well. They're more of course, they're in a retool. They're not rebuilding, but they're still trying to get a new system acclimated. And both teams have not made adjustments. I love Christy Sides. I think she's phenomenal. They're bought in. They're battling. It's only been a week. They're what? They're 1-3. I realize that. Their record's not great, but Indiana is going to be a handful for every team this year. I know New York blasted them, but that was New York off a loss, Connecticut off a loss. Team. 2 tough spots for the Fever. They are going, and they got Vegas next. So I realized those are really tough matchups to begin the season. They're going to battle for 40 minutes.
I agree. And again, Fever in the second half, especially when they're down by a lot, this is a backdoor cover team or a live betting opportunity team. And that's going to be the case as we go through the season. Let's advance now and look to Thursday. We have one game because, of course, the NBA Finals also starting game one, but we have Connecticut Sun at the Minnesota Lynx. The Sun are laying 7.5 as of right now. Of course, we know these lines move frequently. I imagine that it'll move in the direction of the Sun here, and the total is 163 as of now. Again, starts at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 Eastern. We know the NBA Finals game one starts about a half hour after. Confused on the scheduling, but you're going to have double the basketball action. Speaking of that, before we get into it, NBA Finals, how are you after your Celtics Game 7 loss in the Eastern Conference?
I had a Celtics flag up here for the longest time, and I wanted to take it's going to sit on over here off to the side for a week. But, yeah, they've got some they probably shouldn't have been down 3-0 in the first place, and that's stating the obvious. More talented team, but is Miami the better team culture? Possibly. I saw a stat today. The Miami Heat hit 58% of their wide open threes in the series. So it's a tough way to. I mean, and I'm not trying to make it. It's just that's just great execution. Their role players played phenomenally, and at the end of the day, Jaylen Brown did not play like an All NBA player when Jason Tatum got hurt, and they were down 7 in the final minutes of the third quarter. The game, it felt like they were down 25. But they were a little 3-point reliant offensively, and I think Joe Mazzulla was brought in after the Celtics lost in the finals to Golden State last year. I think they looked at it and said, okay, that's the team we got to beat in the West. Now we found out the West was wide open. Sacramento made a leap. Denver was slept on. Lakers looked good with LeBron and AD healthy down the stretch. But they almost built it, and of course Udoka was out moments before the season started, but they took a step forward offensively, but took, I think, 2 steps back defensively. They tried to play catch up and re-identify on the defensive end. It was too little too late. So I give them credit for making a run. They clearly didn't quit on each other, which is a good sign. They could have quit in game 4. They didn't. They bounced back, but it's going to be a fascinating offseason. They have choices to make because Jaylen Brown is up for that max extension. And if you look around the league, if you look at the guys that are getting paid right now, there are some guys on that list you go, who? Like Rudy Gobert is still making almost $40 million a year. Actually, maybe more than that, now that I say that out loud. Karl Anthony Towns makes a lot of money. Ben Simmons is still getting paid. Kyrie Irving. So it's a tough call. It really is a tough call.
They have things to figure out. But to your point, he had incredible execution. Shout out to Spoelstra on that one. I think I saw a stat that said he's taken them to 6 NBA Finals in the last 13 years. Obviously, Jimmy Butler doing what he's doing, Bam Adebayo. I think it'll be a fun, good, solid basketball series. But we do have WNBA on Thursday, and we have 4 games on Friday. We'll look ahead to those Friday games. But first, we do have a line for this. The Connecticut Sun, at least the Connecticut Sun, right? You lost your Celtics, but the Sun are making you proud.
Oh,
they're off to a 4-1 start.
Danielle, the Connecticut Sun are going to save basketball in New England this summer.
You heard it here first. Brendan Glasheen. Sun are off to a 4-1 start. Covered their first 3 games, so maybe the book catching up to how good they are. And overall, have looked like a top 3 or 4 team, more like 3 to me. Surprised a lot of us, myself included, since they did lose an MVP in Jonquel Jones and have a new head coach. What have you thought about how they started the season, how they've looked?
Like I said off the top, it's a new offense. They're really prioritizing movement, off-ball screen actions. I think they're trying to take full advantage. We know how versatile Alyssa Thomas is, and she deserves all that attention, on ball, off ball. But I think we lose sight, and we're not losing it anymore because I think we're seeing it, still trying to figure it out. DeWanna Bonner can be sort of the same player, now not as explosive, and you can't feel it as much. When you watch the game on TV, you can feel the intensity and how dug in Alyssa Thomas is. But they're using DeWanna Bonner not so much anymore as just a spot-up shooter on the wing, 3-point line or 18 feet out. They're using DB as a driver, getting to the basket. I thought the Tiffany Hayes pickup had a season high the other night against Indiana. Each game has scored more points each game. I know it's only a 5-game sample, but Hayes is growing in this system. Played with Bonner in Turkey in the offseason, overseas. So I think the Hayes addition, loved Courtney Williams, what she brought to the table. Hayes, though, can get to the rack and finish. Probably, you could argue just a few years ago before the injuries caught up, of course, in 21 and 22, but a true rim finisher that gives them really a different dynamic that I don't think they've ever had. And they've surrounded them with shooters. Dejanay Carrington got her first true run in the Indiana game. 2 3-pointers made. Beck Allen made a clutch 3 in the home opener against Washington. Heidemann has only gotten better every year as a 3-point shooter. So they're pacing and spacing. It's a lot like how Indiana wants to play, and they've got a great post tandem in Brianna Jones, who had 19, Alyssa Thomas. They've built this around Alyssa Thomas. Drive and kick, work it inside, outside, play with pace. So it's still a work in progress, and they'll take the wins early, right? You beat Washington twice this early in the season. They'll certainly take it. So while they had to squeeze one out the other night, it's a quick turnaround. In my opinion, I know it was off a loss, but it's a tough spot, kind of a look-ahead spot maybe in Indiana coming in. Indiana off a great win. I thought Indiana could have easily overlooked that game because they got their first win. They were really excited about it. So as far as the Sun, I'm optimistic. I think they're no longer under the radar. That's over. Like they're legit. They're in the mix. They've got depth, and I think they're going to be right there at the end. They're going to be in that Final Four semifinal mix.
They seem like they've really figured out how to close out these games as well. Now, the only thing that I think New York did really
last year, no question about it.
Yes.
Big problem last year.
Yeah, and so one of the bets that I know that some of our experts pointed out going into the season was them to win 25 or more games, which you got at really good money, I believe plus 400 or 500. Do you think this is a 25-win team in a 40-game season?
25 and 15 to me it's very much on the table. I think that's. I don't want to.
I think so too.
I don't want to sound too. I mean, I'm a little biased, but I think it's easy. They're going to get there. I think the league is still. There are too many teams at the bottom. Minnesota being one of them right now that are. They're in a transition. Indiana's in a transition culturally. I think they have the talent. I just mentioned all the things they love about Indiana, but they're still in a. Can they be consistent? And I think that's what Connecticut brings in their core of Jones, Thomas, Bonner. Pros, consistency, been there, done that, conference finals, semifinals, WNBA finals. There's only a handful of teams I would put in the conversation with Connecticut. The obvious ones are the Liberty, the Aces. Then there's Washington, who's still, they're like a new team when you really think about it, because they have a season with Delle Donne, then a season without Delle Donne within that same 35, 40 games. Now they've got Delle Donne full go, which is great for the league. Seattle, I think, stepped back, as we know. Chicago, while they've looked good, still a new mix. So I know I mentioned all those things about a new offense for Connecticut, but can't ignore they've got that trio I mentioned, Heidemann, Carrington, players that have been there, some continuity. I mean, they lose 15 games, you still get there, right? You can lose 15 of them. I think the bottom of the league is still catching up, and I think that's why Connecticut can benefit from that.
And Dejanay, good to see her back in the mix finally in that last game. Now, looking at Thursday, like I said, the Connecticut Sun, -7.5. Why will they be able to cover this versus the Lynx?
Well, I don't know.
The Lynx are hungry for that win, right? They haven't won yet. 0-5.
Yeah, look, I think, like I said, there's some veterans scattered on that roster for Minnesota. So I think talent-wise, they're not an 0-5 team, and they've got a coach who's one of the all-time greats in Cheryl Reeve. They're going to play hard every night. They've got McBride back, as I said, at 18 in that game, coming back from missing a couple games. Mitchell, second game, running the point as a starter, I would assume, based on what Cheryl Reeve said. They're going to go forward with Tiffany Mitchell as their starting point guard. They've got players that are still trying to find their footing in the league. And I don't know what the status is of this. Is something I'll be monitoring from calling the game tomorrow from our studios. Diamond Miller, banged up ankle, had looked really good. So that's a setback for a rookie. Where is it going to take a couple games to get readjusted? I don't know. Didn't play the second half. So Diamond Miller was giving them really nice lift in that starting lineup. So Connecticut, luckily, looking across the league, some of these injury reports that come out, I'm like, because we know there's not the depth is tough. We've talked, everyone's talked about not necessarily league expansion, but roster expansion. And
please,
Minnesota's been one of those teams that's had to, insert here and there. For Connecticut, they haven't had to go that route yet, thankfully. But Minnesota, the games they played Minnesota last year, in Minnesota, Alyssa Thomas got the first ever triple-double in franchise history. It was actually the place she started running again when she came back from the Achilles in 2021. That was the first place she ran, Target Center. So that's just like a narrative thing where Alyssa like loves going back there because it reminds her.
Good
Natisha
memories.
Heidemann, a little chip on the shoulder. Minnesota drafted her, got let go, goes to Connecticut. So there's some narratives when this team goes to Minnesota, believe it or not. But in a one-off game, based on how the other night looked too, if Minnesota battles and Connecticut gets in those ruts, those stagnant moments offensively, I don't see why Minnesota can't keep it close. I think Connecticut wins the game. These are the games you want to get to 25 wins. You got to kind of get this kind of game. This is the kind of game you got to get. So I don't know. I couldn't tell you. I thought they would. I honestly thought with the way New York looked off a loss to Washington, playing Indiana, bad spot for the Fever. Like you just woke up a sleeping giant. Brianna Stewart, home opener, back in New York, telling everybody I made the right decision. I thought that kind of spot was going to be the case last night at the Mohegan Sun. Connecticut off a loss, Indiana emotional win, the riding high, 20-game losing streak. Nope, Indiana came to play. So I think Connecticut's still working out some stuff here. So I wouldn't be surprised Minnesota keeps this close.
Yeah, I'm not excited about the spread, but I would lean on giving the points to the Lynx here. Cautiously optimistic for them. What do you think of the total for this? I'd like to look under 163, but not any lower, frankly, after the scoring that we saw from the Lynx on Tuesday versus the Wings. Hesitant, but 1 day's rest, maybe that factors in. I also think, like you said, Diamond Miller, that's an important thing to monitor here because I know she's been contributing to this offense a good bit. I also think both of these teams are very capable defensively, and I know that the Sun have been making a concerted effort to play faster, which makes me more nervous to bet unders for them than, say, last season.
Yeah, Connecticut, and I'll double check this stat right now. Connecticut going, and they still hold the number one three-point defense in the WNBA. Opponent shooting just 26% from three. Minnesota, 10th in the league. Opponent shooting 37%. So now, Tiffany, had it not been for Tiffany Hayes, Connecticut's three-point percentage would have been even uglier than what it was last night. Right. I know Carrington made a couple huge threes. Carrington made one on the right wing. Her first minutes, hadn't played. Crowd erupt. She's a fan favorite. Then hit one on the opposite wing to give the Sun separation and really pad a lead. When you think back now how Indiana made their run, they were getting offensive rebounds. So that's where I'm fascinated by if Minnesota can keep the rebounding battle close, and that's why it's important to mention the Diamond Miller injury, because if they miss someone else,
huge factor.
To help Collier, if Connecticut grabs the rebounds, that means they're getting misses. That means they're out and running because you run more when you don't have to allow a team to set up their defense. That's where they thrive in transition with Alyssa Thomas kind of running the show, as well as Heidemann, as well as Ty Harris. So that to me is a big part of it. Indiana was good at this last year too, before they got Aaliyah Boston. They're a really good offensive rebounding team. And looking now, Minnesota, about eight offensive rebounds a game. Connecticut and Dallas atop the league. Connecticut's up there too. So I think rebounding is a big part of this. With Miller out, that's huge. Minnesota overall 8th in the league in rebounding. Connecticut second, only behind Vegas. So Connecticut's defense is never. That's been their bread and butter. That's been the thing.
Never in question.
They're going to fall back on that. So I think defensively, this could be sort of it could be a dogfight. On Thursday.
I agree. I lean under, but this 163 is about my sticking point. So if it drops at all, I'm not as
rock fight is what I'm trying to say too. Rock fight. That's a better way of putting it.
We also have Friday games. Are there any that jump out to you here? The Liberty at the Sky. We have no lines for this yet. I'm guessing the Liberty are going to be a double-digit favorite here on the road at the Sky. If that's the case, not super interested in it. I also have pause because we know the Chicago Sky are dealing with some injuries and coming off that loss to the Wings. What do you think? Courtney Vandersloot over her assists, except she will be playing her former team.
Yeah, I think Sabrina Ionescu called this their revenge tour. I think it was Sabrina who said that it's a little revenge tour for these players that were mobile in the off season. No, I think James Wade, Kalia Copper, that they're really the two that have to kind of keep this ship in line here, no matter who's in and out of the lineup. But I wouldn't mess. I mean, I think New York is still they're a matchup problem for everybody. Maybe outside of Vegas.
I mean, Seattle was able to get the cover, but that's just because these Liberty spreads are going to be huge, and they're capable of covering them.
Yeah. I would lean. I think New York, they're still trying to get John Cole Jones. I'm not sure what her minute situation is in terms of
still restricted, right?
Yeah, I think so. So that's something to think about. But 18 minutes, only had 2 fouls, but still doesn't look right. Trying to figure out where to put her. They're getting production. I think Thornton is an underrated piece for New York too. So
sure. Just a stacked team all around.
But Chicago has proven, despite all of the players that moved on from their organization in the offseason, they're like Indiana. They're gonna battle. Like they've got players. That's the beauty of this league, is there's opportunities to play when you've got the 145 best players in the world playing.
All right. Any other of the games on Friday that interest you, that you're excited to see? Obviously, we have Wings at Mystics, we have the Aces at the Dream, and the Sparks at the Mercury.
I'm curious to see how Phoenix looks after losing BG's first game back. That was a road game in Los Angeles. I've been impressed with how Kurt Miller he's got them playing hard too. I mean, committing to the defensive end. Kurt's going to his bench quite a bit, has some versatility there. Now, again, I say all that to say, keep an eye on injury reports have been lengthy. It's been weird for me to bring that up because I haven't had to worry about it with Connecticut yet, as I knock on wood here.
Yes, please knock.
But no, I think the Mercury got to start putting some together here. And look, to me at least, I think the coverage of BG's been phenomenal. I almost want to give her a break, like, hey, it was her first week back playing basketball, everybody. This is going to take a little time here to get acclimated to life. So hopefully, and that's still going to happen, I think. They're still really early in the season, a week plus into the year. So I'm curious to see how Phoenix comes out. They got blown out opening night. But it wasn't. I know BG had a great game, and it was great to see that. It really was. But just they want to win. BG's a winner. Won in college. Has won it at a high level in her career with Phoenix. So I'm curious to see what kind of punch Phoenix throws to kind of give it back to Los Angeles the way that the season opened.
Yeah. I completely agree. Now, before we let you go, something we like to do on the show, your win of the week. So what is your win of the week? I'll go first so you can have a moment to gather your thoughts. Mine is that I unpacked as soon as I got home from a trip this week. I did the laundry from the trip. I put it away. Basically a triple-double. That was my win of the week. It could be a betting win. It can be a life win. What was your win?
Life win? Huh. I cleaned my shoes. I cleaned my shoes before my white Nike Air Forces that need to be cleaned when they're white. That's important for game day fit purposes.
I appreciate that. People have been wearing them way too dirty. You got to keep those clean.
Yeah, like the ones you've got on your shelf. Those look very clean. You're doing a great job. I need to continue to do that if I want to wear them on game days, which I did do yesterday at the Mohegan Sun for Connecticut and Indiana. So each time I wear them, I've got to be mentally locked in and get out the detergent, whatever possible, have a rag nearby, and get the job done. So I did that. One for one on the year, especially if I pack them in a suitcase. Like, got to get those out right away and make sure that they're clean, not as wrinkled. Try to keep the wrinkles limited, and we go from there. So it's early. We got to keep that going.
I especially appreciate that because your feet are usually under a desk and you're still keeping it clean.
Yeah, home games though. So this year we're doing the road games remotely, so you can get away with a little bit more. But when you get up and you're walking around, people look at that stuff. So they say they won't. They do. They do.
Yeah.
They judge.
No, we do. We absolutely do. I'll judge you if your sneakers are too dirty. But I won't judge you if you want to share what your win of the week is. If you are a wonderful listener here, we'd love to hear about it. So find us on Bet the W Show on Twitter and let us hear about your wins. Every win counts. Thank you to Brendan Glasheen. Follow him on Twitter at Brendan Glasheen. We like you. If you like us, make sure to follow and rate and subscribe the pod. Thank you. We'll be back here next week.